Tom. Here tonight with me is my favorite partner, Will. How are you, Will?
Doing awesome. Doing awesome.
So let's talk about a little bit about everything that's going on while we're waiting for our other guests to come on.
Oh, where do we begin?
We can start with the Russian airplane violating airspace in Alaska,
In
like back in
Alaska,
the
yeah,
80s.
that's right. Isn't that funny that we're seeing Russian activity and Chinese balloons in objects all at the same time?
It's amazing how we've been living in a fantasy world and we continue to think that our government is there for us.
Well said.
We're really
Well
not,
said, Mark.
right? Um,
Well said.
there's 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 balloons that can't even tell you if it's a balloon, if it's some people say it was cylindrical, they don't even know that. Um, they shoot it down, they don't tell us what they shot down, and they're not going to tell us. Right? They're not going to tell us. So
Yeah. Well, I heard former Ambassador John Bolton today, uh, and I had to agree with him on this subject. It's unprecedented that with this much activity, not just the Chinese spy balloon and the unidentified objects that they've been shooting down, but also the Russian activity over Alaska. It amazed John Bolton and amazes me that President Biden has not done a nationwide address from the Oval Office to explain this to the American.
He's not in charge.
yeah, we know that. But you would think somebody, I mean, if Congress is asking for information, they're not giving it to Congress. Why would they give it to us, right? At the end of the day.
Well, they did say today. They did say today that they briefed the United States Senate Intelligence Committee, and so they're being tight-lipped about it. But it's concerning to me, and I think to a lot of Americans, that the president is not communicating with the American people on this.
No, he's not. Hey, guys, just hang on a second. I want to introduce our guest for tonight. Brandon Ocasio, Channel 4 News employee, disgruntled employee, is on with us tonight. How are you doing, Brandon? Can you hear us, Brandon?
I don't know.
We can't hear you, Brandon.
You may have to reboot, Brandon.
Or he needs to take off his audio and camera fixtures.
Yeah. Well, let's keep talking while he's trying to get on.
Okay, so we saw today too that former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley jumped into the race, and I have a lot of respect in a lot of areas for Nikki Haley, but I was able, and I think a lot of Republicans too, were able to decipher the fact that she's not running for president. She's running for vice president to be on a Donald Trump. She's not going to raise
that
the
would
money.
surprise me.
Yeah, that she's not going to raise the money to run a presidential campaign. There's no way.
But who is going to run? Right? Is DeSantis finally going to decide he's going to throw his hat in the ring, or is it going to be a Trump thing? Because at some point they got to make a decision, right? If they're going to do it or not, and they better make it soon.
Well, they do. They still have for a presidential campaign. They do still have a little bit of time left to make that decision. I was looking at the field that they were projecting. They've got Asa Hutchinson, who's spending time in Iowa, the former governor of Arkansas. Former Vice President Mike Pence is in Iowa, testing the waters. DeSantis, he's a wild card. We don't know yet. But they also had Kristi Noem listed today for the first time as a potential Republican presidential candidate. So it's going to be a wild time for the Republican Party in the 2024 election. However, I think that even former Trump forces are aligning themselves to try to create a new generation outside of Trump to redefine the Republican Party. So you're going to see a pretty wide field, I think, at least 7 to 8.
It'll definitely be very interesting to see who's in there. Brandon, can you hear us? We can't hear you, Brandon. Can you hear us now, Brandon?
Well,
yeah. Well, I guess we'll continue.
Yeah, as we're waiting, I did listen to Nikki Haley's announcement speech today, and she has some really, really impressive points. But she's echoing President Trump in a lot of areas, except for one thing that I found interesting. President Trump is 76 years old. Joe Biden is 80 years old. And Nikki Haley said that if she became president, she would push to have every public official, president, and members of Congress alike tested mentally for mental competence after the age of 75. So I don't know if that was a shot at Donald Trump or not, but that's what she said.
They're all taking shots at each other, right? Because they're all trying to set up their positions, right? I'm the better person or a better candidate than so and so.
That's right.
What can we do, right? So let's talk a little bit about all the misinformation that we're getting and all the trying to keep you from looking at certain things. The problem with food, right? There's actually a food shortage, and we're not paying attention to that. Local governments, right? Especially in California, we all know how California is, right? There is no control. We don't have the people that want to support the right candidates. And then when they say they want to support candidates, they don't show up. Right? They just don't show up. And then they complain. Right. They complain that, Monica Rodriguez got elected again. Well, of course you got elected again, you morons, because you don't vote for anybody else, right?
Well, you mentioned the food crisis, and it is a very, very serious crisis, Tony. A good point you brought up. But as we're going through this food crisis, as food prices are accelerating and skyrocketing here in this country, I mean, look, who would think eggs are a staple at the American breakfast table? For those to become a luxury item where people in the grocery stores start fighting each other over eggs,
right?
We have a fear factor and a crisis here.
Now, I heard say that eggs were more than a pound of ground beef.
Some places they are. That's absolutely true. And so as this is taking place, we also see that 32 states have cut food stamps. They've cut WIC. They've cut allotments for baby formula. And this is at a time when even the middle class, if there is a middle class left, we're proposing these cuts at a time when food is already a shortage. I mean, in this thing that they're doing affects over 30 million Americans in this country, and they don't see a problem with this at all.
And I also see that Joe Biden wants to tap into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve again because prices.
I heard that too.
Yeah,
I heard that too.
That's retarded.
No, well, and look, the fact of the matter is, I was talking to Governor Kristi Noem's office earlier today, and she South Dakota has put out a comprehensive plan to combat communist China, because communist China just recently bought up a lot of South Dakota farmland,
right,
in that state, and they are intent on fighting this thing. And what we have to recognize, though, too, I think Mike and Tony, I think you would both agree, this strange bedfellows that we have between the United States and China has been going on for decades upon decades upon decades. And now the chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak. And now we have to decide how are we going to do this thing, and who's going to be the leadership to do it. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are not the leadership to take on China. It's going to have to be somebody tough, and it's going to have to be a Kristi Noem, a Ron DeSantis, a Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, there are qualified people out there to do this thing. But China is a direct national security threat, not just militarily, not just intelligence-wise, but economically. And we're going to have to make a decision and make it soon.
And not just China. If you think about it, Russia, who is partners with China, is getting more aggressive with their Cold War intentions, like back in the 80s again, right? They're not afraid anymore. Nobody seems to be afraid of the U.S., right? And again, I'll tell you from where I'm working at, ships aren't being repaired because we don't have the parts, right? But yet we have money to give to Ukraine with weapons and ammunition, but we don't have enough money to take care of our own naval ships sitting here.
That's right. And so you know that,
sad.
And you know that firsthand, Tony. Right. Your boots are on the ground.
To sit there and think about this, that we're giving money away to Ukraine, and this jackass is making money hand over foot, but yet we can't fix our own ships. Right?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's
right.
Actually, it's ridiculous that we can't even do that. And yet they're cutting funding.
It's almost criminal, Tony. But go ahead.
No, you brought up a good point. And in 32 states, they're taking away aid to people that don't have enough money to survive, right? But yet here we are again, giving billions of dollars to the Ukraine and not taking care of our own, right? Which is a shame, right? But yet, I'll speak about the California voter. The California voter continues to vote for the same jackasses over and over and over, right?
That's right.
No, everybody talks a good game, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, but they don't care, right? And I'll give you an example. I was approached because people were asking me if I was going to run for the Congress for District 30, Adam Schiff's district. They suggested that I don't run to support a candidate that is a religious fanatic who believes that to be a good leader, you got to be a good Christian, right? And that's the only way people will support you if you come out and say you're a good Christian, right? And all that did was make me not angry, just more excited about running against these morons if I decide to run. Because their mentality that you have to be a Christian to be a good leader is outdated at best, right? That
outdated is a good word. Outdated is a good word, but also fanatical in a way. To think that the Christian right has a hold on the Republican Party.
Saw Brandon for a minute there.
Let's bring Brandon on real quick.
Okay. Absolutely.
Hey, Brandon, welcome to the show.
Is Corey? Is showing it. Welcome to the show. Just talk.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, sir.
You got this. I got George Gascon face tonight. I got George Gascon face for a reason. He's not only soft on crime, but I don't think the citizens of LA really know what's going on. He's actually going to the LA County jail log, the prisoner logs, and he's opening them up and he's going through them name by name. And hey, if he'll kick you right out the same day. He's going down the list. You did a murder, you've been convicted of murder, you're on parole. Okay, you're back out on the streets. And we've got the most dangerous streets now in the history of the United States. Los Angeles, California, the city of angels.
Absolutely.
Hey, Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I got an alias right now, and I got this on my face. I don't want to get fired from Channel 4, but Channel 4 does put China first. It's a rigged media. Everybody knows everybody. All the news directors collude together. We figure out what we're going to put out on the news. And you know, I am sick. I am sick and tired of this. And They may not necessarily bold-faced lie on news stories, but they're just going to omit the story completely. Every single homeless person you see out on the street in North Hollywood, they're smoking meth. They're not going to talk about meth when they talk about homeless. You ever notice that? Mainstream media talking on the news about the homeless people. They're all on scene. Here we are, more homeless people here. Hey, the business owners are upset. They never mention meth. Why? Well, that's the Democratic Socialist agenda by Joe Biden. Borders wide open. The meth is coming up across the border from the Sinaloa cartel. It's being manufactured in Juarez. It's a hub for China with the fentanyl. They're chopping up it. They're making this crap in back alleys, in filthy back alleys in the city of Juarez. And they're getting rich. And our kids are dying. And Joe Biden, he doesn't care.
No, he doesn't. What about Mr. Adam Schiff? Does he care?
Adam Schiff, and another thing we've been covering up, and I'm going to break this out right now for everybody. Everybody look at Adam Schiff. He got plastic surgery. That's right. And no one's talking about it. But you know what he did? He's got some big jowls here. Some Adam Schiff jowls. Remember those? And his squeaker eyes. And when I talk about squeaker eyes, I talk about Adam Schiff. He's a squeaker eye freak. And he's got snake eyes. He's right under oath. He's a criminal. He should be locked up. And let me show you what he did on the plastic surgery. There you go, Adam. Oh, there you go. You ready for the Senate? Okay. There you go. That's what he did. That's what he's spending his money on because he's such a vain prick. It's all about looks. He's running for Senate. He's done enough damage to our country.
Why don't you talk about what you plan on doing a week from Friday?
What we're doing a week from Friday is we're going to be in front of this fool's office in Burbank. And we're going to be protesting, calling him out. Come on out, Adam. Show me the evidence you saw. You colluded and conspired to overthrow an election. You did crime. He should be in prison right now. This guy should be in prison. And believe me, there'd be a lot more in his mouth than my fingers if he was in prison. I love everybody out there. All you patriots, keep on fighting because it's a battle. You've got to show up at Chip's office a week from this Friday on the 24th at 3 p.m. Spend an hour, have some fun in Burbank, do it an hour. We're going to voice our opinions peacefully, and we're going to let Adam Schiff and his constituents inside his office know that we mean business. And we've got him. We know he's a liar. We know he's a criminal. Just look around.
No, you're right. And at some point, the people need to rebel, right? And get engaged and get involved.
Everybody. I agree. You know what? Everybody's a little bit too passive, and look what's happening. Look what's happening. LA school districts giving hormones to our kids. They're pushing the transgender movement on nursery school kids and kindergartners. It's disgusting. Burbank, when you think about it, Burbank is a real Christian kind of family community. There's a lot of Armenians in Burbank. These are Christian people. They have families and businesses. They're professionals. They don't even realize what's going on right under their nose. Outsiders coming in with Eurostat funds, being elected into the city council. And they're running the city of Burbank. It's socialism. And you gotta stand up. Call them out. You know what's going on. If people really knew what was going on, they'd be voting correctly.
Hey, Brandon, we definitely need to get the word out about picketing not just Adam Schiff, but the local politicians like Monica Rodriguez, our Mayor Karen Bass, Gaston, all those criminals.
Exactly. You know, it's corruption to the core in the city of Los Angeles. And it's funny. They call it the city of angels, but we've got the most corrupt DWC, Department of Water and Power, the most corrupt utility, public utility in the world. Billions of dollars unaccounted for. In the coffers, unaccounted for. They don't know where it went. You look at the average salary of a DWC employee, it's over $150,000. You drive down Sheldon Street in Sun Valley and you look at the security guard behind the gate. He's making $145,000. When he retires, he gets $145,000 a year until he dies. You wonder why our rates are so high.
No, I don't wonder.
They're all retiring. They can't keep up with the pensions. They keep raising the rates, and with Garcetti is running the ship, and even right now, they keep on stamping. Okay, approved. City council approved. Raise the rate. Keep raising the rate. It's killing us. And small families with children, they're suffering right now. The media's trying to divide us, saying we're all racist, we hate each other. That's not true.
No, it's not.
We're God-fearing people, we love each other, we'll help anybody out.
Yeah, but you know, part of the problem is some of the Republicans are interested more in the division and fighting as the voters, right?
I agree.
And at some point, you need to fight the fight, and the fight is the evilness that's running the city, the state, and the country.
I
And if
agree.
you don't get off your happy ass with the fight, you're going to lose.
You know, for the Mitt Romneys out there, we have to stick together. They're sticking together, they're unified, and they're organized. We're not. We're fickle and disorganized. It's time everybody has to just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to put our differences aside. We're going for the same cause. Let's fight this thing. Let's get out there Friday, a week from this Friday on the 24th, 3rd and Olive in Burbank. Let's flag out there. Bring an American flag. Let's just go there and stand there and just have fun. And let's all come together. Let's show them that we can produce some numbers out there.
And Brandon, and I'll do on my end, I will post that over my social media so everybody can see it and go out there on Friday.
You're awesome, brother. It's been great to be on your show. And thank you very much.
Thank you for being on, my friend.
God bless you, brother.
All right, sir.
Good night.
Hey, everybody, that was Brandon Ocasio. He works for Channel 4 News. He's a very disgruntled employee. He's wearing a mask because he's afraid that once they find out who he is, he will get terminated from his employment. So I don't blame him for that. But the guy is hell on wheels. He is going to start picketing offices, whether it's he's going to start with Adam Schiff, my favorite character, on a week from this coming Friday at 3 p.m. in Burbank at Adam Schiff's office. And I'll post that address on my Facebook page so everybody sees it.
Well, you know, very interesting. One of the things that he mentioned that I think was really pertinent was he was talking about the fentanyl crisis, and he was talking about the homeless crisis in connection with fentanyl, meth, and so forth. The thing is, now you are starting to see states take action on the fentanyl issue. When in 2016, Mike Riker was telling me about, actually before that, Mike Riker was telling me about the fentanyl crisis in this country. And then President Trump, to his credit, brought up the fentanyl crisis. And without President Trump's voice on that, it might not have become the nationwide issue that it is today.
It's really sad, right, that a government for the people, by the people, completely neglects the people and takes care of people that they shouldn't have priority over us. There's just no way, right? We should have one national anthem, right? But we keep this divisive attitude, kind of like the Super Bowl, right? we're all Americans, right? But no, we have
Right.
to have a black national anthem
BLM.
and an American national anthem. Makes no sense. All we're doing is continuing to divide the people.
Exactly.
Well, then what are we going to do? And then what are we going to do? Final analysis. We're going to have an Asian national anthem,
right?
An Irish national anthem, a Welsh national anthem, a Russian. America is not black and white.
No.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news to BLM, but America is not black and white. America is gray because we are a melting pot of all nations all over the world. And whether, despite religion, nationality, sexual orientation, gender, the fact of the matter is we need to address the American issue. And that is the only way this country is going to be united again. In the final analysis, it is not about black and white. In the final analysis, it is hugely about the vision for our children and our grandchildren and what kind of America we're going to leave them. When we look at those who came before us in 1940s, 1930s, 40s, 50s, in the 1960s, during the greatest civil rights movement of that century, this is a new movement in this century. And until we get over the racial issue and start putting race in place, we need to tell those.
It's not just racial, it's everything, right? Sexual orientation,
it's everything, right?
Religion, right? Adam Schiff posted on Twitter the other day that there was a state that doesn't want to fly the LGBTQ flag on outside of the state. Well, I responded and I said, well, then if you're going to fly that flag, I want you to fly the Puerto Rican flag too. Because I think it's offensive.
How many flags can you fly? How many flags can you fly?
But
the only flag that should be...
No, go ahead.
The only flags that should be flown over a state capital are the American flag and the flag of that state.
Correct.
Period. End of story.
We shouldn't have all these flags, right? And of course, he's not going to respond to my comment because all he's trying to do is make sure that he has that particular group behind him when he runs for Senate, right? That's all he wants. He's not interested in what we need as a whole. They're more interested in what he needs to get re-elected as a senator, which is a sad state if we elect him as a senator.
And this goes back. Our guest was saying is that the Democratic Party knows how to coddle these people.
Right.
You can't coddle the American people and expect them to brace up like we did under the COVID crisis, for God's sake.
Well, they want to give out handouts.
You don't have to be responsible. You don't have to pay your rent. You'll have to pay it eventually, but don't worry about it. Government's going to be there to help you. Well, where is government now?
Well,
they're not there.
Is giving money to the Ukraine so they can't help us, right? We're selling our reserves, our oil reserves. Nobody thinks, why are we doing this? Why are we selling our oil reserves, right?
Yeah. Even prisoners during the COVID crisis, Tony, even prisoners in California were getting stimulus checks.
Yep.
For what?
Hey,
they committed a crime. They committed a crime. They committed a crime. They were convicted. They get 3 meals a day. They don't have to worry about how they're going to put food on the table. The government's doing that for them. They don't have to know, they're not homeless.
Well,
and so why would you send a $1,200 stimulus check to a convicted criminal? Makes no sense.
It makes sense for them, right? Because, look.
Oh yeah, because they
right? You can.
They're looking at that as. But not.
Trying to build their base.
But do you know the percentage of those people that are serving time in prison? How many of them are not ever going to vote? They're going to go out. They're going to go a vast. Look at the recidiv. Look at how many. Look at the revolving door policy of our prison system.
Yep.
Our society and our justice system, and our criminal justice system, is not built to do that. And so I don't know what the Democrats are thinking on that. Yes, if you have served your time and you're off probation, your voting rights should be restored. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But to
you know-
allow people to vote while they're in prison? No.
Yeah.
Your constitutional rights, when you're convicted, your constitutional rights while you're serving your term should be suspended.
Right,
Cory
I
Booker
agree.
was trying to get that passed on the House floor during the last session when
It
everybody
failed.
wasn't around, and Marjorie Taylor Greene shut him down. Says, "I want to vote on that," and that was
Yeah, they
it.
tried to sneak it in. You're right.
Right.
He tried to sneak it in. Yeah.
But you know, and it goes back to this, and I know I make a lot of enemies out there when I say this, but it's the people's fault. It's our fault, right? Because we don't do anything. We pretend we want to help, right? But we really don't. So I'll give you an example of a group that I know that started there was about 30, 40 people the first meeting to picket Monica Rodriguez's office for something that happened, right? That was the first time. The following Friday, it dwindled down to half. By the third Friday, it was down to a handful of people. And by the fourth Friday, there was 3 of us. 3. What happens? People just say, screw it, right? Hua right away. But then it takes effort to go back and do it again and again, and they don't want to do it again, right?
Well, Tony, you brought up a great point, because in this day and age, people, especially young people, they're easily fatigued by the political conflicts facing this country. They are, and so are some people in our generation,
Right.
politically. They're tired of the bullshit.
Right.
And there's a time when you've got to say, enough is enough. But when you give up and you stop engaging in that process, Tony, you know as well as anybody, after your congressional campaign, you could have said, screw it. I'm not going to do anything to try to change the future or the course of this country. But you didn't. You started this format, and you're still testing the waters for another run. And by the way, Mike, I want to say this real quick. Look at the beard on our host tonight.
I know, he's looking good. And my hair's coming back in up top. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Mine barely, but I got a hat to cover that up. And so does Tony when he's not in San Diego.
Yeah, I don't have hair, so it's all good. I'm okay with that. I came to terms with that years ago. Baldness is beautiful, so I'm good.
Yeah, bald lives matter.
So
well, and I'm getting ready to. I'm getting ready
to motivate people to do something, right? That's the big
Well,
question. How do we
well,
motivate people without having a rebellion, for example, right? How do we motivate people?
Tasers.
Well, they've got to put a little like, yeah. It's like George W. It's like George W. Bush once said when he was running for re-election in 2004 for president of the United States. When they asked him, "How are you going to motivate Iraq and Afghanistan to negotiate with the United States?" He said, "Let me stick a garden hose down that sucker's throat. He'll negotiate."
Hey. Well, the difference is that if we do that, we're going to get in trouble. You know how it is. You can't even say sir or ma'am anymore in the United States. So,
I say it all the time. You know what? Make it a crime, and make it a crime, and I'll be convicted of that, because I always say sir, man.
It's you always watch history repeat itself. In 1947, the spacecraft, the UFO crashed. The next day they said, "Oh, it was a weather balloon."
right.
So now they don't want to have sir, yes, sir, ma'am, no, ma'am. Now they want to go back to yes, boss, which is back in the slave days.
Right.
So, it's going around in a big ass circle.
And that's a good point, because what this is all about is control. That's all it is, right? So they mess with your food. They give you a virus, right? They're cutting our oil supply down. They raise prices so that people can't afford it. So guess what? You're going to depend on the government, right? and that's all they want. And the sad part is that the American people, if they see it, they're just saying fine, and if they don't see it, then we need to slap the shit out of them so they wake their ass up.
Well, I've as both of you know, I have always been a huge proponent for LGBTQ rights, always.
Right.
But when those rights trump the rights of parents, as Mike Pence and Allie and I agreed on this today, when you start indoctrinating our children without parental consent, you have violated not just the Constitution of the United States, but you have violated everything that's sacred. Because what do we always say? All government begins in the home.
Right.
First and foremost. When your educational system, and that's what Vice President Pence was dealing with today in Iowa. There is a school district in Iowa that has implemented a program where a child can go to their guidance counselor or their teacher and so forth and transition without parental consent. This is not only a bad law, this is an evil law.
Welcome
and when
to California.
And when government starts indoctrinating your children, you better be well aware.
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is get rid of the Department of Education and allocate it to the states. Then you're going to save the taxpayers' money for those people that are running the unions, and your states will be in charge of what goes on. Let your state legislatures do a parents' bill of rights and stick it to the man.
There should be a parental bill of rights. I agree, Mike. Well said. Well said.
It's amazing to me again how parents, to me, you need to fight for your kids, right? I don't care who you fight. It's your kids. You fight for your kids, whether it's the government, whether it's the school district. You fight for your kids to do the right thing for your kids. You don't. First of all, a 10 or 11-year-old, they don't even know how to wipe their ass yet properly, and we're going to allow them to change their sex,
right?
Without parental consent.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know.
Government thinks that they can do a better job than parents. That is not true.
They can't do a good job with themselves.
They can't even govern themselves.
Look what they're doing to the country, right? These people shouldn't be allowed to be parents or grandparents. Look what they're doing to the nation. They're dividing the nation. They continue their propaganda and
brainwashing the kids.
But look at also what the educational system is doing to the LGBTQ people in this country. Mm-hmm. Look, when you're an adult, you're able to do whatever you want to do with your body. That's sacrosanct.
Right.
That's your body.
When we were all growing up, they had the PTA, Parent Teachers Association. Has anybody heard of that in the last few years? No,
because the teachers union made sure that parents did not have a voice anymore.
Right.
But getting back to my point real quick, the fact is they don't realize that they're doing a huge disservice to LGBTQ people across the country, because when government makes a decision like this, and it's so ultra left and ultra liberal, then you create a hate. You create a total distaste for all LGBTQ people, when that is not the case. There are a lot of conservative LGBTQ people that I know, that I talk to today, that do not agree with this educational policy. And the same thing with critical race theory.
Right.
It's a shame. It's an absolute shame.
Well, I want to since you brought that up, let me bring up this guy. His name is Frank Rodriguez. He is on Instagram, #InfoSavage, and he is LGBTQ just like you, Will, right? He has started a fight against groomers, right? Because like
groomers, that's it.
He's starting to understand what the problem is, right? They're grooming our children to become not, and I hate using the word, there's normal LGBTQT, and then there's the other side of LGBTQT, like in any organization, right? You got people that are crazy BLM.
Tony, it's indoctrinate. It's governmental indoctrination, not much different than what Hitler did.
No, it's not. Now, this kid is from the Inland Empire, Riverside, and he's fighting a fight. He wants to run for office to keep fighting his fight. And yeah, he gets a lot of pushback, but that guy goes to meetings, school board meetings. He goes to events to fight against grooming of our children. And that is an LGBTQ person doing that. That's not somebody like me or Mike. That's somebody that is understanding what's going on. He doesn't have any children, but he sees the big picture of what's happening, right? And we need more people.
No, I absolutely understand. I absolutely understand,
like
and it was like our guest was saying too. When you look at the amount of money, and I'm not talking millions, I'm talking billions of dollars from the federal government to states all across this country with education. California is one of the worst. Arizona too has been one of the worst. And they try to rewrite history, and then parental rights become a thing. Now, Allie and I, we raised 2 children together, and it was not easy. It certainly was not easy. But every time we had to take on the school or the school board, we were there to do it. Every time, because when the educators and the administrators of those educational facilities tell you that, now, this is the way your child should be. We know our children better than any teacher does. They might know them for 6 hours a day, but we have to raise them to allow.
And the epicenter for all this is started in Loudoun County, Virginia, when they said the parents, right, we want the parents watched who come to these meetings to possibly be domestic terrorists. Bullshit. They're concerned.
That's right.
Terrorists.
And that, Mike, you nailed it on the head with that one.
Make it spread.
Because that is how they make the parents the culprit. Right. And I'm telling you, we're living in an age. Look, it's not just our children, though. The government thinks they can screw with your mind too. They give you a stimulus check.
They've got a lot of trying to do.
Well, they do have a lot of trying to do, and they have a long road to hoe in that regard.
And like Rick Perry said, we need to take some of these organizations out, like the Department of Education. Look at the billions of dollars we would save, and just give allocations to different areas that need it. Baltimore didn't have one student out of their whole system that could do math.
Well, and I think another one that he said, I could be wrong, but it would be a branch that I would cut. I would cut a department, and that would be the Department of Commerce. Every state has their own economy and should be governed in that state. But for the federal government to try to dictate business, look at the mess we're in. I don't know why Joe Biden just doesn't admit that America is in a recession, a huge recession.
Oh,
and when they do this,
dumbass, right, Joe?
And he's surrounded, and apparently he's surrounded by a lot of dumbasses.
A lot of millennials.
Well, probably you're absolutely right. I would assume that's the case.
See that smile, Tony.
The Department of Commerce. Why do you need a Department of Commerce?
I mean, my county out here, my executives, they go to other countries to try to bring business in, commerce into the county. And
yes, but only the state and local governments at state know what their businesses are.
That's right, and what they need.
California's businesses are a lot different than Maryland's. California's businesses are a lot different than in Ohio and Michigan. I mean, when it comes to look what happened decades ago with the steel belt in Pittsburgh, in Youngstown, and so forth. And still, we don't recognize that. The federal government, the federal government does have a role to play, but they are a central government for the states. And there are so many issues. Small government. Because the smaller the government, the better for the states and the better for the average American man or woman and child, too. Because I know, look, even we're talking about education. And for God's sake, homeschoolers were getting a bad name for a while. If you homeschooled your children, you were a radical. Well, Allie and I are not radicals. And we homeschooled our children for a bit.
Yeah.
And so,
but
go
you
ahead,
and Allie are good parents, right? And I think you guys are very engaged with your children. The problem nowadays is that I think sometimes parents use excuses about having to work or tired to not be fully engaged with their kids, right? So who do the kids they're gonna attach to other kids and other adults that are giving them that negative influence, kind of like what's happening in today's world, right? You got to be very professional. You can't joke with people. You got to be careful what you say. You got to be careful how you look at somebody, because they'll file some kind of HR complaint. Oh, Tony looked at me and his eyes were they looked mad, but I don't know if he was mad. And then there's investigations and problems that you have to go through just to prove that you didn't do anything wrong, right? That's where we're at in today's world, especially in the business world, right?
What happened? Everybody, we're living in this culture, and I do agree to a great extent that we are in a cultural war here in this country. And I'll tell you why. Because when political correctness started becoming the norm, I mean, look, you could not broadcast, and I'm going to give you the flip side of this. But you could not broadcast Archie Bunker today,
right?
Or Blazing Saddles.
Blazing Saddles. You could not broadcast the Jeffersons today. Oh my God, Mel Brooks would be shot if you try to make another movie today.
Make one, Mel.
But the brilliance of those shows is it compelled the American people to address and face our own prejudice and bias. But the liberals refuse to do that. You make fun of anybody on the ultra liberal side, and they'll file a lawsuit. They'll call the ACLU. And so America, right. America has changed dramatically. And I have to be honest with you. The only reason I come on here and bitch, moan, and groan with you guys is because I have grandchildren that have to grow up. After I'm long gone, we have grandchildren that are going to be our age one day. And what kind of a country are we going to leave them? Are we going to be so? Look, you can be anybody you want. Be a Black American, an Asian American, a gay American, lesbian American, Republican, Democrat, indifferent. Who cares?
I just heard that
when that takes precedent. But when that takes
taking a law class in like common law and stuff like that in high school, and she's actually going on a field trip this week. She's going out to Virginia to go to the DEA museum. So that'll open up her eyes on some things, and that's a kudos, because when I was in high school, we went through government classes. You went to the county executive buildings where the legislation's done. You went to the courts. You even went into the prison systems to see the convicts, and that was your part of your class, and it was great because it was an eye-opening experience. They don't do that anymore.
Well, Mike, now you're carbon dating me, but I'm proud to be old in this era, actually. But when I was in school, we took a civics class, we took an American history class, we took a world history class, and we took a government class. And that was, now they combine it all into one thing, and you can barely do that anymore. Our world is so complex. Our country, for God's sake, is so complex. And we wonder why the new generation could care less about what happens in Syria or Israel or Iran or the Ukraine, because they're trying to make sense out of their own city, their own community.
It's just disheartening to see what's happening, where people don't really, they say they care, but they don't. They all have their ulterior motives for wanting to do something. Kind of like Brandon was saying, the Channel 4 disgruntled employee, about how we don't really care. We're not really engaged. We talk a big game, but it's very few people that are fighting the fight every day. Everybody pretends.
That's right.
They want to go on Instagram and Facebook and put on a suit and say, I'm your candidate, choose me because I'm going to fix everything. And the people buy into the madness, right? People buy into the madness.
But they don't have a plan. They come out and say, I want to do this, but show me a plan how you want to do it.
Well, I can tell you some of their plans. We need to bring Christianity back into the U.S. because that's the solution to everything, right?
Christianity is going to stay in the U.S., but they do not necessarily. Look, if you allowed every religion, our Constitution is very clear. Freedom of religion.
Right.
But that Constitution is also to mean freedom from religion when it comes to the way our government is run. It's like President Kennedy said. Yes, it's like President Kennedy said, I'm not the Catholic candidate for president. I'm the Democratic candidate for president of the United States.
Yeah.
And that is where Ronald Reagan really kind of lost the mark constitutionally, is when he allowed the Jerry Falwells and the moral majority and the religious right to take control of his campaign. It worked for him, but it was bad for the country. And I saw Nikki Haley today, introduced by a televangelist at her political rally, John Hagee, and she literally said, before she even went into her speech, she looked to the televangelist and said, I'm going to say it one more time, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. When she said that, she lost me. First of all, when she grows up, and secondly, she wants to be like John Hagee.
That's scary.
Very scary. And she's off my charts for sure.
People are just naive about things, right? It's not an easy fix. Just because you're not a Christian or you're not Jewish or whatever your religion is doesn't mean you're a bad person. Exactly. We all have different views, right? What's important is the country, the Constitution, and the right for people to do what they want, when they want, without interfering with anybody else. And we've lost that. I mean, the Super Bowl was a prime example of wokeness, right? From the commercials to everything was woke, right? I don't want to watch that. It's a
but you know woke, right? But you know woke, the woke movement, woke is weak because woke weakens the country as a whole. And what the woke movement is doing is not much different than what the Christian Coalition and the ultra Christian right did back in the 1980s. Right. They're just the Democrats just adopted a different method. Well, not the Democrats necessarily. I can't say that, but the ultra liberal left,
right?
The ultra liberal left, the social progressives, let's say.
Yeah, they want to progress for sure.
They want to progress it, and they are literally flushing this country down the toilet. I'm approaching my 60s, and I guarantee you that if I lived another 50 years, which will not be the case, but if I lived another 50 years, I would not recognize unless we change it now, unless we reverse course. You know, I probably won't recognize it. It'll be an entirely different America that I grew up in, or you grew up in.
Oh, absolutely.
And, yeah,
Absolutely.
and you know, another thing, when Donald Trump said that that he thinks we should just eradicate the Constitution, just get rid of it.
Eh,
Yeah, he's
it's a living,
No,
breathing document.
but he said it, and John Bolton brought that up today. Mike Pence brought that up today too. Anybody that threatens the Constitution of the United States, well, you know what? You might as well give it over to China.
That's why we have
Because
the courts.
without that Constitution, there is nothing more to fight for.
Oh, absolutely. And it's sad, again, how people follow certain people for dumb reasons, right? I wish people would think more about
Very
it,
dumb.
you know, like a family, right? So when the government makes a decision, if they don't make the decision in the best interest of the family, which is our nation, right, and our people, then maybe we should get rid of these assholes.
Exactly.
They shouldn't be voted in again, because it's just a constant. Again, how the hell does Adam Schiff get elected time after time after time, and everybody knows he's a liar, everybody knows he's a perv, right? He plays the game, but yet we keep electing him, right? And I say we because I don't vote for him, but as a people, we keep electing him, right? And
Yeah,
now,
it's the whole, right.
now he's embarrassed because they took him out of some committees. So now he's going to run for Senate, and he will probably win again. He will probably
Hopefully not.
well, he probably will win again, and here's why. Because the Democratic machine, the ultra left, has a hold on the state of California. They know who they want. They know who's going to play the game and get rich off of it. You know, look, we're going through this thing now where we're investigating or trying to investigate how many members of Congress have inside information and are investing in stocks. Well, Nancy Pelosi and her husband have been among the biggest. Not that they're the only ones, mind you.
Right.
But she was in a huge leadership position. But there was already a law in the books that says that a member of Congress cannot engage in that activity while they're serving in the United States Congress. It wasn't enforced. So then you need to ask your SEC, your FBI, your local prosecutor. So who buys who? And Nancy without an orange jumpsuit, and a lot of other members of Congress. But this is where term limits are hugely important. If we do not explore, look, we have a term limit for the presidency.
Yep.
Why do we not have a term limit for members of the House? And
you got it for the governors and all these other states.
And we have it for the governors and state legislatures too.
I would take it a step further. I would say you can't donate. It has to be provided by the taxpayers. No outside entity for any money for any election.
No George Soros's.
Right, because then you take away all the special interest groups, and you're just getting a certain amount based on what office you're running for. That's it.
Well, I like your idea, Tony, and I'll tell you why. Because when you look at the ultra left, when you look at Antifa, when you look at BLM, when you look at these ultra liberal groups that claim to support a thing, all the money is funneled to these groups, and then it's funneled to the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes and the Tashib, Rashid, whatever their names are.
Whatever her name is, yeah.
The Ilhan Omar's, you know.
And then it trickles down your state prosecutors who don't want to prosecute certain crimes because they're in on it too.
Like we were just talking about it earlier in this program with Brandon and Gascon. Yeah, It's corruption, corruption, corruption.
And you know, we're out of time, but I want to close with this. People, wake the hell up. Do not let the government continue to run your lives every day. This is our country, not their country. They work for us. We don't work for them. We're not their minions. Stop being their freaking minions and do something. Stand up and fight for your kids. Your kids are everything. Why don't you fight for your kids? Asshole parents, get off your ass and fight for your kids. I'm over your complacency and not giving a damn. Do something.
That's right.
And with that note,
Well,
thank you for tuning into the Tony Rodriguez Show. You can follow me on social media at Tony Rodriguez. I want to thank Brandon Ocasio from Channel 4 for coming out and giving us a little information about the media. And I'm looking forward to having Brandon back on the show. Good night, everybody, and have a great night.